Good afternoon, and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. Welcome, everyone, on this beautiful day. I'm Stephen White, Chief Strategy Officer at COSI, the Center of Science and Industry, and a proud member of CMC's Board of Trustees. Today's live stream is presented by the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch. Let's thank all of those supporting today's forum. The COVID-19 pandemic, it's reshaped office life like no other event in memory. While workers in many professions remain tied to place-based work, millions of office workers have been set free by technology to work anywhere in the world. But has team cohesion and morale suffered as a result? Should the pandemic's changes be the new normal for office workers, or will hybrid work environment be the ideal future that delivers teamwork and flexibility? Today, we'll explore the future of the office and the future of work in Columbus with a panel of leading experts. Let's please welcome today's speaker, Diane Flinders, Vice President of Sales for King Business Interiors, Ira Sharfin, with CEO of Continental Office, and David White, Director of Workforce and Talent Solutions for One Columbus, and our host, Bonnie Meibers, reporter for Columbus Business First. Let's give them a round of applause. Well, thank you for being here today. You can learn more about our leading experts here today on the back of your forum flyer. And Bonnie, we look forward to today's conversation, and the podium is yours.
Thanks, Stephen, and thank you to CMC for having all four of us up here today. Like Stephen said, my name's Bonnie Meibers. I'm a reporter for Columbus Business First, and I cover commercial real estate. And a lot of my coverage since I got here in June has been about the office. I've been talking with all kinds of folks about what they're seeing in the office market today and what we're likely to see in the office market as we exit the pandemic. And in March of 2020, when I was sent home for a couple of weeks, like I'm sure a lot of you here today were, I definitely did not think 2 years from now we'd be having this conversation, but we are, and this conversation is really important. There's no doubt about it. The office is going to look different. The workplace is going to look different. In fact, CBRE recently did a study that found the average worker is going to be spending 1.6 days working remotely versus pre-pandemic figures, which were 0.6. So my first question, and I'd like to start with Diane, and we can just move down the line, is how has the pandemic changed how you do business?
We talked a little bit about this before, but truthfully, the whole idea about remote work or hybrid work was on the cusp of starting way before the pandemic actually hit. And the pandemic seemed to be the catalyst that really drove us to trusting that the remote worker could be productive from that remote location, and that the business unit itself could still be productive even though that worker was remote. So all of the questions that we had in our mind, the pandemic actually answered for us and gave us that ability to say, remote work should not be the fear factor. So for our business, though, I think we are still challenged with allowing employees to have choice. Because even though you went home to work, were you still a high-performing employee as well as you were in the office? There are a lot of features inside of an office space that actually help you do your job better. So right now, for those of us that are in the business of creating space that performs, in tandem with the high-performance employee, we are looking at that power of choice. Like, how can we give you the setting of whether you're collaborating or you're doing focus work. So with that, I would say that that is really where our focus is today. I know Ira has things he would like to add.
No, I mean, similar to, what Diane said, no one asked for the pandemic, right? And, all of our associates were sent home, we're coming up on 2 years, and, for the most part, work from home has worked, but there wasn't really an alternative. And if you think about how it would have been if it was 5, 6 years earlier without Zoom and Teams, it would have been a train wreck. And so technology enabled us to stay connected, and the fact that the whole world was going through this, we've made it work. But, there's fatigue setting in as well. There's a lot of, mental health challenges, and, we thought that a lot of it would be, maybe the older workers, and, all the studies would show, and we've read those, that it's really more of the younger workers that have suffered because many don't have homes and yards and kids to chase around and yell at, and they might be living alone, and they might be in a 500 or 600 square foot apartment. And so not being able to go to restaurants and movie theaters and things like that, has really, put a big challenge on everybody. But long before the pandemic hit, we were working with our clients and our own teams on, how to create the most choice and flexibility possible. And that's really, again, Diane touched on it, it really just accelerated what was going to happen anyways. And, I always think about Winston Churchill saying, never, I don't know the exact quote, John Comerford will correct me, but, never waste a good crisis, or never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think that's what we're doing. We're pivoting and adjusting, but at some point, people have to come back to the office. It might look differently. It's not about the furniture. We both sell great furniture. Others here do as well. But it's really about what you do with space and how you create the great experience for your associates. And I personally don't subscribe to the great resignation. I think people will leave if they don't have a great experience and if executives don't listen to what their people are telling them. But we do need to come back, and the office has never been more important because people will be there less. And if you're there less, it's got to be that much better. And if people come back to how it was 2 years ago, I think there's going to be a big letdown. And I think those are the people whose resumes are going to hit the street, and all of us in the room are going to be interviewing them and probably hiring them, I hope. And so, it's changing. A lot of companies still aren't back, but, we're busy. We're helping people think through how they bring people back, and it's going to be a wild ride, but it's got to be, tailored to each company and what their associates are looking for. It can't be, back in the day where it's more of one size fits all. And so, personally, I'm excited, and, I think as Bonnie, we were talking earlier, anybody who says they have it figured out is either, some type of mystic, where they can see into the future, or, maybe they know something we all don't know, but we'll figure it out, as we do everything else. But it's going to be a wild ride, and things are definitely going to change.
Diane, you mentioned one thing in the beginning of what you were saying, that there was really that sentiment that was already there from employees wanting more flexibility. And I think companies are really slow to change. I think everybody knows that. There's no doubt about that. Even startups that claim to be nimble are still averse to change to some degree. And the pandemic really accelerated that. And now that employees have a taste of it, it's really hard to go back. Like Diane and Ira were saying, that the hybrid is here. I don't think anybody doubts that it's, for the majority of employees, they will not be full-time in the office. For office workers, obviously, we're talking about just that contingent, but that's the crowd that they got the taste of it, they want to see it. And I think what a lot of companies have to figure out is if they went into the pandemic immediately and we're expecting that work style from the office to translate over to home, that's not going to work. And I think that's where you're seeing a lot of those employees that are really unhappy because they don't have the support systems they may have had in the office. Like Diane was saying, there's so many things that happen in the office that you can't recreate at home without intention. And the companies have to be really, really intentional about that. So that's a lot of the work that we're talking to companies about is how do we make those changes? You know, who are the consulting firms out there that have best practices? But I think a lot of companies are still learning. They're going to know more, hopefully this year, as more and more employees start going back to the office in a hybrid setting to get more data, and also understand what do employees want. Like Ira was saying, you have to listen to employees and understand what works for your organization, your culture, and really how you be the most productive in whatever setting that looks like.
Can I just add one more
Yeah, of
comment?
course.
So I just finished the book Out of Office, and I would challenge everybody to read the book because it really is a perspective on what does that hybrid work model look like. But the piece that I did find the most interesting out of the book is, and this is what we are speaking to, the office actually equalizes your ability to do work. Because if you are a young mom and your children are home, or you are, you know, someone that doesn't have an office that, you know, you can designate that space to yourself to do focus work, you do have other challenges that the actual office space provides you to give you that equalized playing field with regards to your, you know, your coworkers. And I do find that to be, you know, again, I think for those of us that are older workers, we have a network and we have like a rhythm to how we work. But for the younger employee, I think that having that level set playing field is a major draw to bring employees back to work.
So kind of touching on something all three of you touched on, can you talk about how the workplace might serve a different function when we all get back to the office?
I do, again, I think, you know, it can't go without saying that we both have clients that employees have gone home, and the large majority of what they will do is from a home base or from that home setting. But the office will be a home base. It will be your cultural hub. It will be where you instill values of why you work for the company that you work for. And it will be the space that you do knowledge share. I mean, you can't, we all know this. You can't, project teams are teams for a reason. Ira has taught me a lot about teams in footballs. But teams are built for a reason. No one, if Darla was here, she would say, no single mind is as smart as many minds. So that natural need to be together. So what we really need to, and again, there's so many people that are solving this puzzle, but the technology piece of being able to have, it's seamless. I mean, that whole idea of asynchronous work and it to be seamless is really, it's fascinating, and it will be what our teams are challenged to present, so that when you come into the space, it will be seamless. And whether your coworker is on a robot or whether your coworker is sitting right beside you, it will become just a natural part of life. It's the way I see the future, but we're future-minded.
Yeah, we're all pontificating on the future. You know, again, to build on what Diane said, it's really hard to maintain a culture without an office. And, you know, the challenges that a lot of companies are having today is, you know, they've hired and they're trying to onboard and train people during a pandemic. And although, again, you can do certain things through Zoom, it's not the same as being in front of people and being around a table. And, you know, we're trying to do that as safe as possible, and no one thought the pandemic would still be going on, and so, we're adapting, but you need that office to come together. It doesn't have to be every day of the week. The office used to be a place where your desktop computer was, and your files, and, all your stuff. And, our stuff now can be in a purse, it can be in a backpack, it can be in a briefcase. And so we've become more mobile. There's experts on both ends of the spectrum. My prior career before I bought Continental, I was a consulting partner and traveled globally quite a bit. And I worked out of my home. I worked out of a hotel. I was rarely in the office. But the nature of that work was complete mobility and on-site at a client. Most companies don't operate that way. And so, yes, you can have distributed teams across the country. We were talking about that earlier. And certainly, what David gets involved in, but you need that home base. It's like, when you were a kid playing tag, there's always home base. You're safe when you touch the refrigerator or whatever it is. And it's kind of how we live in our homes too, right? 75–80% of the time we're in that kitchen family room combo, and yet we spend all our money on bedroom furniture and bathroom fixtures and things, and we're never, we're rarely there. But we need that hub. And so that's my point earlier of the office has never been more important. Real estate, office, it doesn't go away. It's got to be better, and the product's got to be better. And that's what I think companies are going through. And for many of them, they're kind of kicking the can down the road a little further. And eventually, you gotta bring people back, because those people are going to feel probably less connected to their teams. And one quick story then I'll stop talking for a couple of minutes is one of the client executives I was talking to recently. She was telling me a story of someone who left someone really experienced on her team, and I'm like, oh, that's too bad. And she said, yeah, she left because she wanted to work in the office full time. I'm like, wait a minute. She left because she couldn't work in it. Yeah, we couldn't support that based on security and our protocols. And I'm like, wow, I've heard of people leaving because they wanted to work home 100%. And this is someone who wanted to work in the office 100%, a senior level person, and they quit. And, I just left that meeting thinking, that's a problem. We have to address those things. So we'll get there.
I think a lot of the companies that a lot of the companies that we are talking to definitively, they see the office as a space for collaboration, innovation, and relationship building. So as an example, on somebody's first day, if you are just onboarding them remotely, it's really difficult, like Ira was talking about, to get the culture across to employees. You can't have somebody walk up to AEP Tower and say, this is AEP, we are a giant company. Go look at Nationwide Arena and see the AEP Power Tower and all the community involvement that they have. That's something that companies want to have a physical presence for, so you can bring them in, showcase this is how we work, build those relationships with other departments potentially, and also have a space for sparking ideas, innovation. I think that's one of the things that when you read a lot of articles, a lot of management really is concerned about the just hallway run-ins, the water cooler talk, and in reality, that can be recreated online and in hybrid models, but it is a lot easier in person. And so I think the companies we're talking to, they are in a lot of senses going to be having people come in. I realize this is probably just mansplaining something that everybody already knows, but that model of coming in a few days a week is really that best practice where you have maybe a smaller footprint from an office space perspective, but it is a lot more innovative space. And that's what Ira and Diane work on every day, is creating those spark spaces, not actual spark space downtown, but places where you can really spark innovation. So I think a lot of the co-working spaces are probably going to do pretty well, I would imagine. Places like Cohatch, Hopewell Works, WeWork, those spaces for companies to get off-site, but also maybe their offices turn into something like that, where you can have more innovative, collaborative space and also just a space to build relationships, so it's more like going to a coffee shop or something like that. And from a recruiting perspective, like Ira was saying, that home base is really important. So a lot of the strategies we're seeing work really well for companies is kind of a hub and spoke model where they might have their HQ in Columbus, but instead of just recruiting in Columbus and making people relocate here, they're saying, hey, we can hire people in Cleveland and Dayton and Cincinnati and Akron, even in Indianapolis, and maybe 1 or 2 days a week, they drive to the office, have that FaceTime, that collaboration, but it really opens up the talent pool for them to bring people in where they're working for a company here, but maybe they live somewhere else. But they still have that home base where they can kind of build the culture and build the relationships out.
So David, can you talk about how you think Columbus might benefit on the whole from more remote work?
That's a really tough question, because I think there's a lot of benefits, but I think we have to do it right, and companies have to do it right. I think the flexibility piece for employees is so important, and that's what employees want, because I think, and Diane, I read the same book, and so some of my thoughts might come from that book, but it really does spark some really interesting ideas where the more flexibility employees have to do things outside of work where you're not just tied to your computer for 8 to 10 hours a day, it really breeds more community involvement for a lot of people, because they can get out and they don't feel like I always have to be here. Maybe I can go to the CMC luncheon and have the flexibility to do something like that, or go to other events or volunteer more. And it really opens up time where maybe I do take 2 hours out of the day, but then I can make up that time at night if my work doesn't have to be done during a normal 9 to 5. And so I think there's a lot of potential benefits, but that's really up to employers, like I mentioned earlier, thinking through those strategies, being intentional with policies on how they're going to let employees have that flexibility. And I think when we talk about flexibility, it is not just that can I work from home, but it's also flexibility in my schedule. Where are these meetings actually required? Do they have to happen right now? Could we do other things than just have meetings all the time where you have to be on a computer, have to be on camera or on the phone, or could it just be an announcement or an email or something like that?
Do you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say that I think the benefit of maybe remote work, to your point, it does offer you, it's so funny. It only takes me like 15 minutes to get to the office, but I did notice when I didn't have to think about, I have to jump in the car to get to that meeting, I had an extra 15 minutes. And I can only imagine if somebody has like an hour commute or a half-hour commute, what does that extra time in your day look like? So the benefit is obviously you can, some people work out, some people read books, but there are things that you could do to better yourself, right? To be a more generative person in the community. But I do think what has to happen is, just the community itself then, we have a responsibility to make sure that there are things in the community, whether it's the Scioto Mile or the different things that you can go out and stretch your mind if you are remote work. Because when you are at work, we intentionally make it so that you are moving throughout the day and that you are having a separation of work-life balance. Like you come to work, you leave, you have transitions, you have trigger points. When you are remote, the onus now is on you. So you have to think to yourself, what does the structure of my day look like? So, it's what our communities, we talked a little bit about what the communities look like, where you live and what that neighborhood looks like and what it offers. Those are probably going to be some of the other benefits we see as communities develop around different ideas of remote work.
Yeah, just to add, I think Columbus does have a big advantage when it comes to remote work. And, David certainly knows this more than probably most or all of us, but for those of us that grew up here, I grew up in Columbus, or if you've been here a long time, Columbus has changed a lot. And I lived in Chicago for 16 years, and, Chicago, New York, San Francisco, they're still great cities. They're going to be great cities, but Columbus, maybe it hasn't, gotten to the same level, but has become a much more vibrant, cooler city. And, the housing choices, whether you own or rent, the arts, the sports, education, it's all better. And so I think, in some cases, Columbus is, more on par with cities that were maybe viewed as better than us in the past, like an Austin or a Nashville and places like that. And, it's certainly why, David and all, the great work that, One Columbus is doing, you're able to attract companies here. And it benefits all of us, right? It's new neighbors, it's companies for us to all work with, for, people that are building infrastructure and residential units. So if you're going to be remote, why wouldn't you live in Columbus? I mean, you have all those advantages, and you can get anywhere, in an hour or two. So I think it's, a lot of upside.
Bonnie, can I add one more thing?
Yeah, of course.
So I apologize, as an introvert, and I actually think through things, I come up with better responses. So you just have to give me a minute to think through. So I actually think there's a crucial thing that remote and hybrid work allows us to do, which is create more access points for underserved populations. And so if somebody doesn't have to drive to work and have a car, it's a lot easier and a lot cheaper for somebody to pay for $50 a month broadband versus paying $300+ a month for a car to drive to the office. And so it opens up a lot of access points for people that maybe didn't have access to those opportunities before because there were barriers in place. And so that could be historically underrepresented populations. It could be differently able people. There's a lot of companies that are utilizing that remote work and flexible model to access different talent pools, which right now our labor participation rate is dramatically down from where it was in 2019. That allows us to tap into other populations that we maybe overlooked, missed. There were too many barriers for us to be able to access those people. So I think it does create a really interesting opportunity to get more people into the workforce, provide more opportunities, and really create those economic pathways for somebody to become more sustainable in their life.
Anything else to add?
Well, in our previous conversation too, just, talking at the table, just that whole idea of, it's not just your paycheck that you're looking for anymore. It is amenity-based, what does the company actually offer me, as well as the city. David really did open my eyes. I think just that whole idea of just generational thinking, what are the things that we were used to having, growing up, getting the car, driving to work, all of that, versus being more of, I want to do things, I want to pack a lot into my day. I want to have more amenities in my life. I want to, look for those type of things. And again, those are what the city brings us as well as what the business. So the city and business partnership are just huge. And we are very grateful for, One Columbus and the work that they do to help us as well.
Well, could you talk about some of those amenities that office workers might be looking for in their workplace?
Well, most people immediately think of Google. And, that process, I don't know, when they started that with regards to work was everything. It provided you, a place to have fun as well as work with your teammates, and you were on a campus. It really wasn't that far off from your campus life, from your college life. I mean, they really did just embed that whole college experience into the work life, a natural transition. So some of those amenities, though, today, broadband access, being able to meet with a lot of your other coworkers in more of a relaxed setting, or just to have a stand-up and you're all around a table and you have a quick meeting. Those are things that when we provide space, we look at what is the work that is being performed. Is it something that is, you are collaborating with a team, you are just doing a check-in? There is, we both have different ways to assess and work with companies. What is your business fingerprint? What does your DNA look like? What are you trying to achieve with the space, your real estate? So we look at human performance, operational performance, and the real estate itself. How does it support the work that you are trying to get done? And there are just so many different assessment tools that we use so that we can tweak and refine, because with each iteration of work, you are looking for something, different in how you work. I'll let you.
Yeah, I think, years ago with a lot of the startups and, again, probably started more on the West Coast, people thought about amenities as, pool tables and ping pong tables and all the tchotchke things, which are kind of fun, but you can do those at home or at a bar. It's really not necessary in the workplace. And so, I tend to think of amenities in three buckets. There's stuff, there's, providing, snacks and healthy food and things like that. Health and wellness is a big amenity that a lot of companies are getting on board with. And so I think that's certainly important because people work hard and you should provide, good coffee and healthy snacks. Then there's the space itself, and the one that really comes to mind is outdoor space. That's one of the best amenities you could provide, and a lot of the new buildings, even if, they're high-rise buildings, have outdoor access, and that's something that if you don't have it, you really, notice it. And, I lived in an apartment in Chicago with no, very, very few windows, and, I was wondering why I was kind of cranky and grumpy, and it's because I like being outside. So for the year, I just didn't spend much time inside. But outdoor access is really important, just looking at the view here, from the boathouse. And then the third, which, I kind of viewed an amenity, maybe most wouldn't, is just access, for development, especially if you're, a young associate at a company, the access to leaders and executives in the company. And that really is an amenity because it's so easy to do. It's free. And instead of having executives sit in their office and go to meetings and, sit on panels and so forth, it's, if you spend, companies that have their executives, and there's some companies that are really good about that in town, and we probably know who those are, they get out. They spend time with new associates. They welcome them. They write notes. They have lunches and coffees with them. That's huge. That gets people sticky and probably, lowers the turnover rate at those companies. So that's at least the three buckets that I tend to think of.
Do you have anything to add?
I come with data, and so not that anecdotally those aren't important because I agree with everything you both just said, but actually LinkedIn just released their 2022 Global Talent Trends. I thought this was really interesting, and it really alludes to a lot of the stuff that you were talking about. 63% of employees prioritize work-life balance. Employees prioritize work-life balance 63% over benefits and pay at 60%, and culture and colleagues at 40%, which I think is pretty fascinating to look at, that it's more important to have work-life balance and that flexibility that we've been talking about over pay and benefits. And I think a lot of the surveys outside of just the LinkedIn data allude to employees wanting that, and they really prioritize that because that allows them to have a better life. Even though more pay might mean a better life, I think the pay doesn't necessarily always equate to that. But some other really interesting stats, so when employees are satisfied with their company's time and location flexibility policy, they're 2.1 times more likely to recommend working for that company. And if employees feel cared about at work, a lot of the stuff that Ira was just talking about, management getting involved, mentoring, actually having pathways to develop, they're 3.7 more times likely to recommend working there. Talk about the Great Resignation and employees wanting to leave. If companies really get a good grasp on that, that's going to want to keep employees there, or that's going to keep employees wanting to work there, but not just wanting to work there, but also utilizing the referral networks to get more people to work there, which a lot of companies that we work with, referrals are one of their top methods of getting employees. So those are just a few data points I wanted to share, but also I think childcare is such an issue, even outside of this conversation about office work, for people that aren't able to work at a hybrid or remote level. If I have to go to a manufacturing facility or a distribution facility, childcare is huge. So either childcare subsidies, on-site childcare, that is a big thing that companies are starting to think about and think through, how can we solve that? It's a bigger issue than just one company. So we've seen some companies pulling together, working together, holding hands, locking arms, and thinking through, if we have maybe five manufacturers over here, can we work to get a childcare center here? And there's some things being done in the city that are looking promising, but more companies really need to lock arms and do something about that. And we're seeing a lot of movement on that, but that's one area that I think from a perk or benefit standpoint that companies are thinking through. I think the flexibility also kind of goes into childcare as well, because if my kids are off school over the summer, that creates some issues. There might be a sick child or something like that where you need that flexibility to change your schedule and shift. So it all kind of ties in together.
I have to just bring up a quick story because, okay, so if you guys don't know, Darla King is actually the owner of King Business Interiors, and her family members are here, Chelsea, her daughter, and Dave. But I've known Darla for 30 years, and she has always been a proponent anytime anybody is having a baby. She's like, yes, it's finally time that we're going to get the childcare in the office, because she does believe, we both grew up juggling as working moms what to do with childcare. And when she started the business, she said the one thing that we are going to always be flexible about is that ability to balance, childcare issues with work, because that is the number one pressure, just as a female representative, that's on all of us. So I would say I do think childcare is critically important, and I'm glad you brought it up, David. So.
That's another talent pool that has been left behind in the pandemic recovery we're going through is unmarried mothers and mothers of children under 5 there's some data that I'm happy to share from a Brookings study. I think their most recent data was in March, but it's somewhere around 5% of the workforce that had dropped out still hasn't come back in those two categories. And those are huge, and I think they make sense because there's no support systems in place. So when companies can address those and create that flexibility or even just support systems at work, those are things they can do to try to attract more workforce as well.
Well, we're going to move to questions from our live stream audience and our audience here in person in a few minutes. So if you have a question, make your way to the microphone back there with Mantra. And before we take audience questions, I do have one last question for you guys. Can you talk about how company culture is going to have to evolve for companies to move forward out of this pandemic?
Certainly. Again, your company culture is really, the pandemic put a spotlight on it for everybody. Is it as strong as you think it was? And I think that is part of the situation that we're in. Business leaders are looking at what that company culture looks like. But if it is based on trust, if it is based on information sharing and allowing your employees to have a sense of choice, we know that those 3 factors are what keep employees engaged, satisfied, and will continue on to do their best work. So culture itself, we bring it together in the places we provide, but it really is based on, us as leaders, how we trust, our employees, and how we share information, and how we are advocates for choice, because I do feel that, that's really where your culture thrives.
Yeah, I'm glad Diane mentioned trust. I think trust is probably one of the biggest eye-opening concepts that companies and leaders need to get their head around, and not just lip service, because if you trust your people and if you shift from productivity, which was the old measure of butts and seats, is Susie here? It's 8:30, why isn't she at her cubicle? To one of outcomes, set clear expectations, have a lot of communication, trust your team, and then measure based on outcomes, we can manage all of this. And, I think the other one is a culture of not creating adversarial situations that don't have to be created. companies that say we expect everybody to be here 75% of the time. To me, you're saying, please get your resume ready. I mean, why do you have to say that? You could say, we want people to come to the office to help build our culture and on board and train and share experiences. You can probably get to the same step, but my oldest daughter interviewed for a job recently, one she was offered and didn't accept, and they said, we expect everybody to be in the office 4 days a week. She said, well, how do they know how I work? They don't even know me. And so she went with one that had greater flexibility, and she'll probably be in the office 4 days a week. But we don't have to create these adversarial situations. But I think if we trust and communicate and really focus on outcomes, companies that do that are going to be the winners, and those that use the old productivity measures from years ago are not going to be the winners.
I would say being intentional and listening to employees. I think I already said that, but it's something that's really important for businesses to show that they're valuing employee sentiment and want to create that environment for them. But also being open to change and adapt quickly. Whereas I think so many companies are risk averse. I know I said that again earlier, but being open, having an open mind, and really having that willingness to do things that maybe you've never done before that you think sound scary from a management standpoint. But like both of you said, trust is so key, and showcasing that trust to employees goes so far from a retention standpoint, and also just building up that culture in a positive way.
Thanks, guys. It's CMC's longstanding tradition to take audience questions. Mantra Moody of CMC is curating our live stream questions, and then if you're here in-house, make your way over there if you have a question. Please keep your questions brief and to the point. Mantra, what's our first question?
All right, so we have a lot of questions online, and as you can see, there are people behind me, so we want to get these answered as quickly as possible. So the first question is from Leah Dooley from Nationwide Children's Hospital, and you touched a little bit on this, but she asked, how can we best support remote onboarding and support through skilled management? What skills do managers need to learn now in order to support teams, and how does generation factor into the remote workforce?
Okay, I'm just going to toss out there, I don't know, but because I'm not a human resource person. However, I would say there is a gentleman from GitLab. I wish I had my notes. He actually has a ton of work based on remote work and how best to train teams. And GitLab publishes everything. They are all about openly sharing anytime they have any type of work. So I would direct the person in that direction.
GitLab is fabulous. So, I use the resource as well, and communicate as much as you can, and, seek out more experts in terms of, remote onboarding. But, a lot of it's communication and making sure people have mentors and get up to speed quickly. Don't leave them out there hanging.
Yeah, and with the new generation, one thing to think through is that generation, Gen Z, I believe I saw a stat that said that is the latest generation to enter the workforce as far as their first job. And for a lot of them, they're thrown into this virtual world and don't have the opportunities for mentorship, like Ira was saying, or opportunities for learning just soft skills or just basics about how to conduct yourself in a meeting, how to write an email, how to respond thoughtfully to things. And so that's one area that I think as companies are figuring out what does our permanent hybrid policy look like, we have to make sure that we have those strategies in place and also those support systems to really recreate. Whereas somebody might just be joining in-person meetings, what does that look like now? Is it just joining virtual meetings? Do they have mentors in place that maybe aren't mentors that are in charge of firing them or their performance review, but somebody that's external, not external from the firm, but on maybe a different team that can give them advice that they can go to for questions. And then for managers, I truly believe that managers are so critical in that virtual world of just making sure that expectations are set. and seeking mentors. If your organization doesn't have anything in place, which I would imagine they probably do, but for managers seeking mentors and kind of being able to say, I don't know what to do, and go seek help would be something. And I'm sure there's somebody that's willing to invest in that person if there aren't those things in place. Maybe it's a smaller company that doesn't have the strategy or the policies or procedures in place.
What's your question?
Good afternoon. I'm Bill Wayhoff with Steptoe and Johnson PLC. Thanks for sharing all your wisdom. I have kind of a blocking and tackling type of question, which is, what innovations have occurred that are readily available in office furnishings that make it more pleasant or more productive or more healthy to be in the office? Thanks.
Well, we are excited about a new product that is coming to market that is going to give more user flexibility as far as being able to team, being able to have height adjustability. We talked a little bit about well-being. So there are manufacturers that we represent have huge research teams that have done a lot of studies with regards to the materials that they use, the way that things are shaped. Things are softening up, everything is coming down. We do have greater transparency, and we are definitely spending a lot of time thinking about, what to do with the floor plate and what should, how much space should be devoted to different types of work. So it's a little bit of everything. It's a little bit about how the product is made, what the product is made with, how technology interfaces with it. But there is a huge amount of research that goes into designing office products, if you can imagine.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think height adjustability, sit to stand, because we sit too much, and certainly as you get older, you can have back issues. Ergonomic seating, a lot of great options out there. And, I think, again, back to choice and flexibility, just providing, from the old days of sitting at a cubicle, from when you get in until you leave and go home for dinner, allowing people to move throughout the office. And maybe it is at a cubicle, maybe it's a phone booth, maybe it's, more of a lounge setting. It's really incorporating some of the elements of what we have at our homes too, and how we sit and move throughout our house depending on the activities we're doing. But there are a lot of great products out there, and it's easy to find what will meet your specific needs.
Not being the office furniture expert, I'm just going to add something from my own personal experience that I love. The phone booths, I've had them at my current organization and the last company I work for, and it's a godsend. They're completely noise-proof. They have air conditioning or ventilation in them. You can have a call, and it's a great flexible space, so you can have a little bit of privacy for a quick call or something like that, non-bookable. And then also white noise machines are also a godsend. I can't tell you how many times I would walk into the office before they turn on at 8 o'clock in the morning and be like, what is happening in here? I can hear a pin drop. But then as soon as they go on, you don't even realize it, that they're on. Those are two things that if you don't have those, check them out. I highly recommend them.
All right, Katie Trumbitis from Columbus State Community College asks, does the home-based concept have varying degrees of success or benefits across employees of different races or ethnicities?
Again, like I mentioned, I do think the home base offers the level set playing field, because you are coming in as an employee with your contribution without any bias. So I do think that is the biggest case for the office itself, but we can't take away the fact that you are probably juggling different life situations. So making sure that whether you are in the office or at your home, I do believe is what is going to, level set for society. I really do.
Yeah, not much to add. I like the idea of level setting. There's some great products, and we talk to our clients. If you're going to have associates going forward that are going to work 50% or more from the home, you should think about providing them with home office solutions. And I guess I'm kind of making a pitch, for both of us to sell stuff, but it's not that expensive to provide an ergonomic chair, height adjustable table, and a monitor arm. And, if we're really going to invest in people going forward and level set and not have any biases, that's, to me, price of admission.
One area that I think employers could get into, I don't want to say some trouble, but I think is something to really think through strategically, is if you offer hybrid and then you have a certain contingent of people that are coming into the office, and those are the only people getting promoted, that can be a really big issue, and it kind of showcases a lot of things. But like I mentioned earlier, thinking through strategies and procedures for eliminating the in-person bias that you might have for somebody that's sitting in front of you versus somebody at home, making sure that people on the phone or on a call, if you're half your team's in person, half the team's on the call, making sure maybe you have a moderator that is making sure that everybody's included on the call, that you're getting that value, but also that the managers are trained to make sure that they're giving equal treatment to people that are working from home versus in person, regardless of what that situation is. So some things that I know a lot of companies are already thinking through, making sure that they have that in place, but something to definitely think through.
And David, I would add, if you are a manager or, a business owner, one of the things that we learned long ago, if you want your culture to shift, you better demonstrate the direction you want them to shift. So if you do have remote work, you too should remote work. It should not be you are only taking care of those that you see. You should also, as a manager, recognize the challenges that all employees have. So, that is a critical piece as a manager to take note of.
Good afternoon. My name is Opal Brandt. I'm with the Workforce Development Board of Central Ohio, and this is a great segue to my question. I'm interested in knowing what your take on is of businesses' readiness to make some of these changes, reimagining their office for childcare, reimagining their strategy for home office. Are they coming to you for those opportunities, and are they coming to you to help their employees reimagine their own workspace for those who cannot come into the office? Thank you.
It is, again, there are huge teams. There are architectural teams, design teams, ourselves with regards to the products that we provide. There's the civic teams, the Columbus, One teams that really are looking at what does a business need in order to be ready to pivot and make these changes. I mean, we get back to where we started. The pandemic pushed us, and now we have to think through those next steps. So I think, HR teams, sales teams, there are a lot of teams that are really putting a lot of thought and effort as to, what does it take to become workforce ready. And personally, I think one thing that we can learn is best practice is to share. Like, one of the things that we did is we brought, different client segments together just to share during that time of silence. I'm sure we all did it, not to pitch or sell anything, but to allow people the forum to say, we're all struggling with this issue, so how can we collectively solve together? So, and share best practices. So I think as business leaders, that needs to happen.
We've got time for one more question, so we're going to take one more audience question.
Hi, my name's Nidhi Satyani, and my question is for all three of you, but mostly for Ira and Diane. You mentioned that as we move to the hybrid workspace, that the onus for creating spaces that really maximize human performance is going to shift to the individuals and to the communities, or at least part of that onus. What does that look like? What are the things that we can do in our home to increase human performance? What are the things how does that look in the community? Is that community centers? Is that lighting in community centers? Is that windows in community centers? Like, what does that look like?
You know, I do think the work from home is different for everybody because you have to determine how much space you can devote to that, right? So there are people that are looking for those co-working spaces. I agree with Ira that there is going to be a need for more of that type of space. But just individually, you know, I am going to make a pitch here. The dining chair is not the best chair. And there are solutions out there that are affordable. And I would encourage teams to push their employers for better ergonomics if you are, to your point, 50% or more at home. Because, you know, those were issues that we tackle on a daily basis anyways, because your work performance shouldn't have a physical strain on you as well. I'm sure you have.
Yeah, just one last comment. I mean, there's a lot of talk about human performance, and if you don't really use data analytics and gather and find out what's important to your folks and what disruptions they have, how they're in the flow, in the zone, you're really guessing. And, you know, I call those the million-dollar mistakes that companies are going to make. And so if you really dig in and use, you know, workplace assessments, David mentioned HopoWorks, that they've really, you know, have a software, a tool that can do that. It's pretty powerful. So focus on data.
Sorry. I wish we had more time to hear from you guys, but unfortunately, or not unfortunately, we're excited to have Stephen back on stage. But we're going to turn it back over to Stephen. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Wow. Wow. That was incredible. Well, I hope you found today's forum insightful. I know I did. As we navigate this unprecedented pandemic, we have a moment. We have a moment to ignore the box and think differently about the future of work, the future of our colleagues, and the future of our lives. And I think the message here today is that the future of work, well, the future of work is you. And as we decide what the future of our home base is, or where our hub is, as Ira put, with that focus on trust, we have to think about, as Diane put it, that the office can be that knowledge share. It can be that opportunity for us to equalize work. But as we heard from David, from the incredible statistics that he shared related to LinkedIn, flexibility is also critically important in this dynamic. So as we decide the future of work, as you decide the future of work, let's navigate these changes together. So please make plans to join us next week at CMC as we present Organizations Laser Focus on Social Impact, featuring a panel of experts. Thank you to our online virtual seat patrons and the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation for presenting our live stream in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch. And a special appreciation to our powerhouse panel here today and experts, Diane, Flinders, Ira, Sharfin, and David White, as well as our incredible host, Bonnie Meibers. Let's give them a round of applause for their great feedback today. And thank each and every one of you for joining us. We could not do this without each of you. We look forward to seeing you next week at the Columbus Metropolitan Club as we present yet another community conversation. Thank you and have a great day.